Welcome to Majors and Quinn, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I'm a bookseller here. I'm so pleased tonight that you're joining us to celebrate Joe Siple's new book, The 5 Wishes of Mr. Murray McBride. A few housekeeping things before we get on with the show. Tonight you will hear from Joe, and then there will be a time at the end of the program for audience questions. After Q&A, please allow our author to move to the signing counter, which is the glass display you saw as you were passing on your way to the front. You may line up there, say hello, and get a signed copy of the book tonight. If you do buy a book here this evening, you're not only supporting our author, but also a locally owned independent bookstore, and we cannot thank you enough. Finally, please allow me to introduce our guest. Joe Siple is a television sportscaster turned novelist and speaker, and the author of the best-selling Murray McBride trilogy. A native of Minnesota, he now lives in Colorado with his wife and 2 daughters. Learn more about him at joesiplebooks.com. Please join me in welcoming Joe Siple.
Thank you, Sarah. And I kind of want to start just by saying thank you to everybody here and acknowledging that, like, I understand what this is. I live in Fort Collins now, and several years ago, Neil Gaiman came and did a book signing, and it was flying across the block and people waiting and stuff. And I know that, like, most people here are friends or family or friends of family, and I just want you to know that I acknowledge and appreciate that you're here to support me, and I think it's amazing, and I really am super grateful. Also really excited to be here because of that girl right there, Lily, my daughter. That girl back there too, kind of playing in the same area. But the reason specifically I'm excited to be at Majors and Quinn is Lily came and hung out with my sister Julie for a while and decided that Majors and Quinn was her favorite bookstore in the world. And so I immediately had the goal, like, I really want to be able to go to Majors and Quinn. And in addition to that, one time we were doing Walk and Bindle, which it's not very creatively named. We get up in the morning at like 6 a.m. We go for a walk around the neighborhood, and then at 7 o'clock we get to Bindle, which is our favorite coffee shop in Fort Collins. Get there for the opening. We're usually like there a couple minutes before, so we can stand in line, be the first ones in to smell the pastries and stuff. But one day when we were doing our walk, part of Walk and Bindle, Lily said, wouldn't it be so cool if someday I could go into a bookstore and see your book on the bookshelves? Because at that point, she couldn't. And so I kind of set as my life goal at that point to be able to have Lily be able to walk into a bookstore and find my books, and to be able to do it at her favorite bookstore and be able to do this in addition is just really special. So this is really cool, and I don't take any of it for granted. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. I asked, what would you like me to do in this book signing? And they said, well, you can read a little bit from one of the books, and then talk a little bit, and then answer questions if people have questions. So I think that's what I'll do. So to introduce the part I'm going to read, and the Murray McBride series was originally just a standalone book, The 5 Wishes. When that did well, my publisher was like, what else you got in the Murray McBride world? So I ended up writing The Final Wish, and then The First Wish is a prequel. It just, all of these books were kind of republished by a bigger publisher this past spring, which I'll talk a little bit more about as well. But so I'm going to read just a little bit from The 5 Wishes, and for anybody that isn't familiar with the story, it's about Murray McBride, who's this 100-year-old man who's looking for a reason to live, and he finds it in a 10-year-old boy named Jason Cashman, who has a terminal heart defect and a list of 5 things he wants to do before he dies. So Murray takes Jason under his wing, and they set out to check off as many wishes as they can in the limited time they have left. And so I'm going to read just a little portion where they're trying to tackle his first wish, which the reason I decided to do this is because it has been rewritten. It may be different than what you wrote or what you read, even if you read the published book. And there's a little story behind that, is that I wrote it, and his first wish is to kiss a girl on the lips. And so I wrote this scene, and I was super excited about it, and his 10-year-old boy, they decided together that it's probably not a good idea to kiss a 10-year-old girl because she's a 10-year-old girl, but hey, what about like this 18-year-old captain of the cheerleading team? And so they decided on her, and in my mind when I wrote it, It's a 10-year-old kid and an adult. Because 18-year-old, I'm like, all right, my kids were about 10 at the time, so I understood 10-year-old kid. 18-year-old, I'm thinking adult. And so I wrote it, and in my mind it was innocent enough. But the kid, he was a kiss, like he's wrapping his arm around her neck, and like it was a kiss, and it was not exactly, he didn't ask consent beforehand. We'll say that. And so, a couple years later, I was rereading the book for the first time in a couple of years because I was working on the sequel, and I wanted to make sure for continuity issues and everything, I didn't screw anything up. So, for the sake of familiarity, I just read through it again. And I got to that scene and it made me uncomfortable. And I was shocked that it made me uncomfortable because I did not see that at all in the first writing or the first 90,000 times I read it. But it did. And so I went to my trusted source of Lily Siple over here. And I said, Lil, when you read that, did it make you uncomfortable at all? And she's like, yeah. So I was like, all right, I got to change it. And so I called my publisher, and it is true that all these were Sarah not very generously said, it was my new book, and it is new in the sense that it just came out in bookstores, and it was republished by a bigger publisher recently and all that stuff. But the original edition was published back in 2018 as just a print-on-demand publisher, which I'll talk more about in a little bit. But anyway, so I called my publisher up, and I said, look, I know that this thing has sold like 100,000 copies out already, but I need to change the book. And he was understanding, he was cool, and he was like, all right, so I only rewrote maybe a paragraph, like, 4 sentences to change it. And I felt much better about it, and I think it still worked, and maybe even better. So I'm gonna read that portion of the chapter right now. Okay, so where I'm going to start here is, let's see, Murray and Jason's girl next door named Tegan comes with on their adventures, and so I'm going to start right where we just meet Tegan. All right. My name's Tegan, sir, the girl says, and she puts her hand out for a shake. Tegan Rose Marie Atherton, first base girl and cleanup hitter. By the way, this is in first person present tense from Murray's point of view. I'm a little taken aback by this kid. Can't rightly say what it is about her, actually. Her confidence, maybe, or her maturity. Jason here is a 10-year-old kid. Thinks like one, acts like one, looks like one, other than his size. But something about this girl seems beyond her years. It's a pleasure to meet you, Tegan Rose Marie Atherton. My name's Murray McBride. I'm a friend of this here Jason. Neat, she says, bouncing more than a person ought to. I'm a friend of this here Jason, too. Are not, Jason yells, looking straight ahead through the windshield. Where are you taking him? I hesitate a moment, then decide on the truth. Going to kiss his first girl, that's what. It's a wish thing, see? You're welcome to join us if it's okay with your folks. What, to watch? Thanks, but no thanks. It was nice to meet you, Mr. McBride. Bye, Jay. And with that, she turns and bounces up to Jason's porch, where the woman next to Anna, the one with the colored hair, jumps to her feet and says something that sounds like SBK and gives Tegan a big smooch on the cheek. She picks her up, twirls her around, and ends it with a bear hug. I would have thought the woman was her mother, except I've never seen a mother so excited to see her own child, unless they haven't been together for a good long time. Tegan says that same thing back to the woman, SBK. I can't believe you invited her along, Jason says when I'm finally in the car. She's a girl. Don't you understand that? A girl. I ignore him and drive to the parking lot of the high school football stadium. Feels almost like when I'd show up at Wrigley for a ball game. The excitement and nerves, the anticipation for what's to come, the knowledge that anything could happen. I pull into a spot close to the football stadium so as not to arouse suspicion. And there they are. A row of girls in blue and white skirts kicking and chanting and waving pom-poms like it's nobody's business. When Jason sees Mindy Applegate in her cheerleader's outfit, his confidence vanishes and his face turns an odd shade of purple. Turns out I'm kind of glad little Tegan didn't come along. Probably just make things harder for him. Breathe, I say, and I reach into the back and grab the oxygen mask. Really fill your lungs. He fogs the mask up good, gets a few deep breaths, and starts to look better. Do you remember the plan? He nods, no words. Then he pulls the post-it note from his pocket and stares at it. His breathing slows and he closes his eyes. You can do it, I say. Just remember, tell her you have a message from Jared Miller and he'd like a response. When she asks what the message is, pucker your lips like you're Jared looking for a kiss. With any luck, she'll give you a little peck. Then you turn and get yourself the hell out of there. I'll definitely have to confess that cuss to Father James tomorrow, in front of a kid no less. But he needs to know this could turn south if he doesn't stick to the plan. Jason folds his list and replaces it in his pocket. His face has turned ashen again, but I think it's fear this time, not a lack of oxygen. I changed my mind, he says. I don't want to do this anymore. I study him close. Pale white cheeks, short, uneven breaths. For all I know, he could be an inch away from a heart attack, or whatever his condition might do to him. So I turn the keys and put the Chevy into drive. It's okay, I say. There's no shame in turning back. I inch the car forward toward the exit of the parking lot. Before leaving Mindy Applegate behind for good, I steal one more glance at Jason. His eyes are closed, his face is in his hands, and one tiny tear is trickling down his cheek. I go to the nearest parking spot and put the Chevy right back into park. I see what's going on here, and I won't be a part of it. Listen, son, I say, and he peeks at me through two fingers. There are times in our lives when we're faced with something that scares us. I mean scares the bejesus out of us. We'd rather curl up into a hole and hide. Don't care what we miss out on. Don't care if we spend our whole lives in that hole, just as long as we don't have to face that scary thing. That about what you're feeling right now? He turns to look out the window, anywhere but at me. I study him close and see the slightest nod. I understand, I say. When I was going to kiss Jenny for the first time, I nearly passed out and fell right over. Decided I couldn't do it, same as you. Decided if that's what kissing a girl felt like, I didn't want anything to do with it. So I didn't. But then you know what happened? A little shake of the head, an even littler voice. No. Nothing. That's what. I did nothing. Then she decided I must not like her. When Ernie Wells asked her to go steady, she said yes. Wasn't until then that I realized she was worth coming out of my hole for. That I'd rather face that fear and have Jenny than live in that hole without her. I put my hand on his shoulder and squeeze, which is about as touchy-feely as I get. You just have to decide. Is Mindy Applegate, is kissing a girl while you still can, worth climbing out of your hole for? Jason wipes his tears and stares hard at the dashboard. What happened with that girl you liked? And the guy, Ernie? Did you ever get the girl back? Sure did. How? I realized life's not worth a pile of beans if you don't live it, so I started living it. Jason swallows hard and touches the pocket where he put his list. He takes one more deep breath from his oxygen mask, and without a word, he leaves the car and strides toward the group of cheerleaders. He's not even waiting for them to take a break. Suddenly, I'm the one who can't breathe. If he gets himself slapped and loses all confidence, I don't know how I'll live with myself. But it's too late now. Even though the girls are shouting and swinging their arms and kicking their legs, Jason strides right up to Mindy Applegate, narrowly avoiding a kick in the jaw. I see his mouth moving, and Mindy stops her cheering and listens. I open the window to try to hear, but it's too muffled. Jason finishes talking and tilts his head up with his lips puckered out for a kiss. Now, the moment of truth. Mindy's first response is not what I was hoping to see. As her fellow cheerleaders use the interruption as an excuse to take a break, Mindy leans away from Jason, as if the idea of kissing him is repulsive to her. All the while, Jason remains perfectly still, head tilted up in the sunlight, eyes closed, lips puckered, just waiting for his wish to come true. After a few awkward moments, Mindy stops leaning away from him. She looks around, almost like she's making sure the coast is clear. Then, so quick I almost miss it, Mindy Applegate, captain of the cheerleading team for Lemon Grove High School and Jason Cashman's dream girl, leans forward and gives him the most fleeting of kisses, barely brushing his lips with hers. Jason's body gives a jolt as if he's been electrocuted. He stands frozen in place while Mindy casually walks away. He remains paralyzed, all by himself, for several long moments. Finally, he turns and sprints back toward the getaway car. His face is lit up like the grand finale on the 4th of July, and he sports the biggest ear-to-ear grin I've ever seen. Slap happy is what he is. He's trying to run, but can't stop himself from skipping every few steps. His arms are waving like the 10-year-old kid he is, and he seems to be giggling so hysterically he's about to cry. Behind him, I hear the stunned voice of Mindy Applegate talking to her fellow cheerleaders, and since she's staring after Jason, she's facing the car enough that I can make out the words. He said it was from Jared. Can you believe it? From Jared. I don't have a perfectly clean conscience about what's happened here. At some point, poor Mindy Applegate is going to realize the kiss wasn't a message from the hulking quarterback, and that some half-perverted kid played a joke on her. But one look at the utter glee on the face of this kid who might not live to ever have a girlfriend makes me forget Mindy. Whatever happens with her, we're sure not going to be around to see it. Shake a leg, I yell out the window. Go, 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 Jason shouts when he gets in the car. And for the first time in nearly 80 years, I burn rubber and leave tracks like we're fleeing a crime scene. Thank you, and now I can feel okay about that. Before I see if any of you have any questions, one of the things that, when I'm talking to, thank you, book clubs or high school Rotary clubs, whatever the case may be, a lot of the times people want to hear about my Rotary publication, especially after they kind of heard an abbreviated version of it. And so I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit, and I think it really explains a lot for why I'm as grateful as I am to all of you and to Majors and Quinn and everything to be able to be here. I started writing fiction in 2001. I was at my girlfriend's apartment, and she was in medical school. I meant to ask her last night if she was okay with me calling her boring. I didn't ask, and so I figured that probably means I shouldn't call her boring. She's amazing. But I will say, medical school students are diligent, dedicated students. So when you're the boyfriend of a medical school student, visiting them is boring. Right? That's on me. I caught that I didn't forget to even call you boring. So one day I was hanging out at her apartment, and she was studying, of course, and so I decided I was going to go to the computer and write a story, and I don't know why. But I started writing a story, and I'd never really done anything like that before, and I was immediately hooked, and I thought it was the funnest thing in the world, and so I wrote an entire story. I realized later that I basically plagiarized 2 of my favorite books and made it into one story, but I was excited about it. I thought it was amazing. So I looked into, what do you do if you want to get a book published? And you have to get a literary agent, so then they can submit it to the publishers, and that's how it all works. And so all right, I went to Barnes & Noble, and picked up the Writer's Market, which is this big, thick book that has a list of all the agents and editors and everything. And then I turned it around and saw the price. I'm like, all right, well, I'm not buying a Writer's Market. I didn't have any money. But I did sit in the cafe and made a list of like the 50 agents that I thought, probably the first 50 agents. I didn't know what I was doing. And I sent them all a query letter. And this was back in the day, the 2001, which, I know it doesn't, to me, it doesn't feel like that long ago, but like the internet wasn't even that very big at the time, and these agents didn't have email addresses, and so I had to, personalize each one of these query letters, and then go home and fold it up and put it in an envelope and put a stamp on it and address it, and then include the self-addressed stamped envelope so that they could get back to me and say, of course I want to be your agent. So I did that 50 times, and I sent it off, and I waited for all of them to say yes, and it didn't happen. They all said no. But not even like personally, but just with form rejection letters. And at the time, I was shocked. I couldn't believe that nobody wanted to publish this book. Looking back, it makes perfect sense why nobody wanted to publish that book. But I was hooked. And so even though I wasn't able to get that first manuscript published in 2002, I tried again. And I realized that that's kind of the timeline for me for writing a story, is about a year to be able to write a story, make it the best I can make it, go to Barnes & Noble, write a list, write some query letters, and send them off. And so I did it again in 2002, and same results. In 2003, started a brand new manuscript, did it all over again, same results. 2004, 2005, 2006. And somebody asked me at that point, like, kind of politely, but basically, you know, why don't you quit? Why do you keep doing this? And I had just heard something I thought was really interesting, where you sometimes hear the thought experiment of, like, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And it's this great idea of thinking, like, don't be afraid to do the things you love, right? But the thing that I heard that I thought was even better is somebody said, well, what would you do if you knew you were going to fail? And at first I was like, well, I don't know, probably nothing. Like, why would I want to, if I know I'm going to fail, why would I do anything? Like, exactly. If you know that you're not going to have success, how are you going to spend your time? What are the things you love doing? But it doesn't, suddenly your definition of success isn't succeeding in the traditional form. It's enjoying the time that you have. And so I really took that to heart, and I realized that writing stories is something that I really enjoy doing, and I will do that even if I know I can't have success. And so I kept doing it. And 2007, and 2008, and 2009, and the only thing I did is I increased the number of agents that I would send it to. So I'm hundreds and hundreds of times being rejected. And again, somebody asked, you know, why do you keep doing this? And then I realized that I didn't really know, and I thought more about it, and I realized it was because of the never going to get there lesson, which some of my family and friends have heard about, but it's something my dad taught me when I was growing up. And I actually have a lot of people ask me about it now, because it's in the dedication of the 5 Wishes of Mr. Murray McBride. It says, to my dad, John Siple, for teaching me perseverance through the never going to get there lesson, I'll be forever grateful. And so people will say, did you have this overbearing father that was like, you're never going to have success, and now you're trying to have success for, you know, out of spite? Like, no, actually, it's about as far from that as you can get. I had a great relationship with my dad. One of my favorite times when I was growing up was 5 o'clock, because that's when he would get home from work, and we'd go in the backyard and play catch with baseball. And we'd play catch, and then, you know, every once in a while we'd kind of not really get bored, but we wanted to make it a little more exciting. It's like early gamification, I guess. And so he would throw a pop-up, and that was more challenging. And so it was a lot of fun to catch the pop-up and, you know, feel like he was proud, and it was super cool. And I get to where I could catch the pop-up pretty regularly. So then he'd introduce another level of difficulty and throw the pop-up far away from me, and so I have to run. And if you've never tried to catch a pop-up while running, like, it's bouncy and stuff, and it makes it a lot more harder, especially when you're a 10-year-old kid. Eventually I got to where I could run a little bit and make a catch. And so we just throw it a little farther away, and a little farther and farther, and finally he'd throw one that was super far away, and he'd say, never gonna get there. And it was this cool moment the first time I got there. And I realized over the course of my childhood, and hearing that phrase, never going to get there, that what my dad was doing is he was throwing a pop-up really far away, saying never going to get there, and then putting it in a spot where I actually had a chance to get there. And I realized that those words, never going to get there, didn't actually mean you're never going to get there. It means you might have to work a little harder. And so I took that lesson with me through all of my life, and specifically as I continued to get rejected over and over and over for my writing. And finally I got to 2013, so hundreds and hundreds of rejections and 13 manuscripts, and, you know, even though I enjoyed writing, it was hard to take. And finally I realized I'm gonna try a different way. And I ran into this, I think it was in the back of a Writer's Digest, and I saw an ad for a pitch conference. And I thought, maybe I can't write, but I can talk a little bit. Maybe I can convince somebody, just, you should publish this book. Don't read it, but just listen to me. So I went to this pitch conference. Somehow I convinced my wife that after 13 years of failure and rejection, hundreds and hundreds of rejections, that it's a great idea to drop like $2,000 to sign up for this conference and then fly out to New York City and stay in Manhattan. And apparently hotels in Manhattan are super expensive, I'd never been there before, so I didn't know, and I got like the junkiest one. It was like $400 a night. I went there, it had just gotten robbed right before I got there, and the police thought I might have done it because I showed up right afterward, and it was a mess. But I didn't rob anybody. And I went to this pitch conference, and it was cool. What the setup was, there was, at the end of the pitch conference, you have 4 acquisitions editors from publishers that you got to pitch your book to. So it's almost like you skip the step of the agents. And at the end of this weekend, 3-day weekend conference, I was the only one in this group of attendees to have all 4 of the acquisitions editors request to see my manuscript. And one of the most exciting weekends of my entire life. And I remember walking around Central Park after that happened, and I just thought my life was going to change. And in a way it did, because it happened that the person who ran that small group was a literary agent. And so she ended up taking me on as a client. So after all these years, I finally had an agent. But in the back of my mind, I knew that nobody was taking me on because I was a good writer, because it had been proven to me over and over and over that I wasn't. And they didn't read anything that I had written yet. And so, sure enough, we submitted to all those acquisitions editors that wanted to see it, and they all turned it down along with everybody else. But at least I had an agent. And so I wrote another manuscript in 2014 and 15 and 16. And the only thing that had changed is the people who were rejecting me. Instead of being agents, now it was acquisitions editors. So really not much had changed. And then in 2017, I finally had finished this story I'd been working on for a long time. And it definitely had more meaning to me than anything else I'd written before. And part of it is because my dad died when I started writing it. And when I came back to it, it was really a form of therapy as much as anything else. And I no longer cared what agents thought or what acquisitions editors wanted or even what any theoretical reader down the road would think. I was just writing for myself at that point. And I called it 5 Wishes. And so in 2017, I still had my agent, and I finished it, and she said, yes, this is you. You found the book that you write in this type of story. But she submitted it to 19 editors, and they all said no. And so I was kind of thinking it was time for a change. My agent, as wonderful as she was, sold mostly mysteries. I don't write mysteries. So I thought maybe I just needed a different agent. So I very professionally and amicably broke things off with her, thinking I'd get another agent to try to sell 5 Wishes. And I submitted to a bunch of agents, and unlike before, they were actually very interested this time. So that was new. But when I told them this has been submitted to 19 people and they all said no, they all said, well, show me your next book. But this was the one that I thought was good. So it put me in a really tough spot because I never wanted to self-publish we could have a long discussion about that. But in my mind, I knew I wasn't any good when I started, and so I needed the gatekeeper to tell me I was good enough. That's why I was never going to self-publish. But now I knew I couldn't get published by a big publisher with this book either, and I really love this book. So right about then, this new kind of publisher popped up, which all these different terms for it. I call it glorified self-publishing. Like, it's basically publishers that will do all the work, so you don't have to pay anything, and so that made it a little bit more legitimate in my mind. And they do all the artwork and the formatting and all that, whatever that you do to publish a book. I don't think it's not something I'm interested in. But since they did it, I figured it's legitimate. But it's print on demand, which is how self-publishing works. And I decided with this book, I think it's got a good chance to resonate with people, and so I'm going to go ahead and do it. And so I found this publisher called Black Rose Writing. Basically a dude in his computer at the time. They've grown a lot since then, but and he said he would publish it, and I knew that this was like his business model was basically publish anything and everything, and maybe something will hit, and if not, these authors are desperate enough, they're going to buy enough of their own books to make it to where I break even and probably make a little bit of money. So I had no illusions about what was happening there, but I really wanted to get it published, and so I did that. And then the day came when my author copies came, and I didn't buy many of them because I didn't want to play that game, but I wanted to have copies of my book, so I bought like 5. And it came in the mail, and I opened the box, and I was so excited. I ran outside to grab the box, and I came back and tore it open and picked up a book and looked at it, and my heart just sank. It had the look of a self-published book, and for anybody that has has read self-published books or print-on-demand books, like it just looks different. And not that there's anything wrong with that in itself, but that's not what I was shooting for. And after all this time, it was just a reminder of all the failure that I'd had. And so I put the book right back in the box and went down to our storage area. And like I even took things from the very far corner and buried this in the corner and put all this stuff over the top of it. And I just, for the first time, I quit. I just realized I didn't have it in me. I was not going to be an author. But fortunately, about 2 weeks before I made that decision, I had entered the book into a little contest. Really a little contest. Like it's for self-published and print-on-demand publisher type books. It's called the Maxi Awards. And I think there might have even been some connection between my publisher and the award. I don't know. But they emailed me and said, not only was this book, which I had changed to The 5 Wishes of Mr. Murray McBride, being named their winner of the category, but they were naming it their Book of the Year for 2018. Again, means nothing really, except that this was the first time in my entire life that I felt like somebody who didn't have to tell me they liked what I wrote because they're my family or friends and they don't want to hurt my feelings, told me they liked something I wrote. And it made all the difference. And so I started putting into a bunch of other contests, and it did really well. And it started selling slowly, but the reviews were really high. And once people started leaving reviews that were really amazing to read, because they talked about how, not just, it's a good book, I suggest it, but it was like, connected to my soul on some deep level, and I cried for 3 days, I'm still thinking about it, that type of thing. And so when people see that type of a review, then they're a little more interested in checking this thing out. And so it very quickly started to snowball. And when we got to about 150,000 copies sold, the big publishers started coming back and saying, actually we're interested in this thing. And so I did end up publishing it with Union Square and Company, which their parent company was Barnes & Noble at the time. It's now Hachette. And so that just came out this spring. And those are the books that we have out there, the 5 Wishes, and then the sequel, The Final Wish of Mr. Murray McBride, and the prequel, The First Wish. And it's just been a crazy road. And because of that crazy road, I don't take any of these things for granted. And we were fortunate enough to hit the USA Today bestseller list and to translate it into 13 languages. We just sold the film rights to a guy that's really motivated to make it into a film. So I'm very excited about all these things. And every single thing that happens feels like Christmas. It's just really fun. And to be able to be here with Lily out there and my wife. It's just really cool, and I really appreciate you guys coming and being here for, whether it's for me or for my sister, who I know asked some of you to come out, and she's amazing. Thank you so much. Or anybody else, I really appreciate everybody being here, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Yes.
Are you working on another book?
Am I working on another book? Always. So I've got a lot going on right now, actually. I've got a book that's going to come out in May, and it was a hard choice about what to do with that, because doors are definitely open now that weren't open before. And with this one, I decided to stick with the same publisher that I've been with, a print-on-demand publisher, for a couple of reasons. One is I wanted to handle it in a very specific way and have complete control over that, and that is one of the nice things about these print-on-demand publishers. You have complete control, especially because mine was the first book to really take off, and so I can kind of do what I want there. And I'm super excited about it because, Lil, I'm wearing you out here, but she and I like to write songs together, and one of the big themes and plot points throughout this book is about a song that the main characters write together, this family writes together that ends up blowing up. And I decided, wouldn't it be cool if I refer to the song all throughout the book, and then at the end of the book, I get this song professionally produced and then linked to it so people can listen to the actual song after they finish reading the book. And the funny thing is, I had started, when I wrote the first draft, just some random song. Like, I just made it up. It wasn't even a song. I was just put some lyrics down. And I'm like, wait a second. Lily and I wrote a super good song, I think, and I'm going to base it on that. And so the song is called The Songwriters, because it's about Lily and I in our basement writing songs together. And I'm super excited about that book because I like the story, but then also having the book there, the song there at the end of the book, I think is just, I think it's fun. In addition to that, I have recently signed with a new agent for the project following that, because I think that it is going to be, I'm prone to hyperbole. I see my family laughing. We got a thing where I can't keep things in. And so my older brother, Justin, who isn't here tonight, he's the exact opposite. There was one day where we were together for Christmas or something, and he's like, you guys want to have a honey tasting? And honey? What are you talking about? Where are you going to get honey? Oh, for the last 10 years, every time we go somewhere, I've been going to a roadside honey place and getting honey. So I've got 10 years with a honey. We're like, what are you talking about? Where if that was me, I would have been like, guys, I just had this great idea. Someday, I'm going to start getting honey, and we're going to have a tasting 20 years from now. I wouldn't stop talking about it for the 20 years. Anyway, I'm excited about this book that's going to be published, was where that was all going. I think it might be, it has a chance to be like the most important thing that I write, as well as maybe the best commercially. The reason why I say it is because I wrote a first draft and I feel really good about it, and it seems to hit in a way that a book hasn't since probably the Murray McBride books. So I'm excited about that, but also the topic is, it's really kind of an investigation into the benefits and drawbacks of technology in society, specifically social media and doom scrolling and things like that. And the characters I'm excited about. It's a 71-year-old woman who goes back to college and kind of befriends a 19-year-old freshman boy, and she convinces him to go a week without his phone. And then it goes from there. And I'm super excited about that. We're planning to shop that in March, so I'm hoping to get to work on that. I've been busy on some other things. The other thing I've been busy on, and I don't know if anybody here listened to the audiobook of The 5 Wishes of Mr. Murray McBride. If you did, I apologize. It's a nice man that did it, but it was his first ever audiobook, because this was, in 2018, released with no expectations, no fanfare whatsoever, and so they just kind of found someone, and he didn't do as good of a job as I was hoping, and so I'm redoing it myself. And the second and third book in the series I did myself, and then this one in December we get the rights back, and so if you get the audiobook after December, it'll be me voicing it. So anyway, I've had a lot of stuff going on, been super busy, and it's really exciting, and that is the longest answer to are you working on anything else? Anybody else want to know anything?
Did you know that the McBride books were going to be a trilogy when you started? And if not, when did you figure that out?
Yeah, no, she asked if I knew that the Murray McBride books would be a trilogy when I started. I did not. It was very much a standalone book, and was going to remain so even after it had some success. My publisher kept on coming back, being like, what happens to Murray? What's next with Murray? And I'm like, well, he was 100 years old in the book, so I don't think I'm giving away too much of a secret here. He dies. All right, so Murray's gone. So how am I going to write a sequel when the Murray, who's a main character, which I wrote in first person present tense, is no longer with us? Like, how do you handle that? And I didn't want to just write something just for the sake of writing it because I had something that was successful. Apparently I was all high and mighty all of a sudden. Like, no, I'm only going to do it if I want to write the book. Don't know what that was all about. But then I found something that I really wanted to write about. My family and I went on what we call a volunteer vacation to Guatemala. And it just means like you do some volunteer projects that are kind of set up and organized by the organization we went through, and then you also see the sights, so a volunteer vacation. And meeting the people there made me decide that I wanted to write a book more or less about immigration. So I knew I was taking a chance there, but I really wanted to write a book that I wasn't trying to set out a policy that I think we should have. I'm not smart enough to know what that should be, but I am smart enough to know that we should treat everybody as a human. And so I decided I wanted to write a story about that. And so that's where Jason, the young boy in the first book, he meets a young Guatemalan girl and kind of takes her under his wing and develops a list of 5 wishes the same way Marie did. So anyway, that was the next one. And then the following one I just recently wrote. In fact, it was going to be released this spring no matter what, and it just ended up being that's when it was the deal with the bigger publisher happened, and so they're the only ones to have published a print version of that book because of the timing. And that was one where it's really about dementia. And to be honest, the biggest reason I wanted to write that is it fit the story. I wanted to write Murray and Jenny's story. Jenny's his wife, and so that's what makes it a prequel, is it's before the first one. But I had been just like experiencing some moments that are, hopefully, probably just kind of normal aging things, but it freaked me out a little bit, and it really got me thinking about dementia. And then I realized so many people are dealing with it, and so I talked to the woman that runs an organization in Fort Collins called Dementia Together, and they're a super good organization that helps people. And I met with some men who are caring for their wives who have dementia, because that's what happens in the story, is Murray's caring for Jenny, his wife, who has dementia. And I realized that I really wanted to make sure that when I write stories that it means something to me, and that I feel like a reader might be able to get something out of it more than just an escape. Nothing wrong with escapism books, I love them myself, but it's not what I like to write. I want to be feeling passionately about the thing that I'm writing, because that's how I write best. And that's how I feel like I get the most out of it and enjoy it the most. And if it is this thing that I'm going to be doing with a large chunk of my life, then I want it to be worth something. Another long answer. I don't know, we're doing time.
Are the books really long?
The books are not really long. Maybe I should start dictating them instead of writing them. Except the nice thing about a book is like I can write all of these things I'm saying and then cut it all, because now I can't take this back. Like, I apologize, you just have to sit there and listen. There's nothing you can do about it. Can't get those times back. No, my books are about 75,000 words, which is pretty short. Quick reads. All right, well, thank you guys for coming. Like you said, I think they ordered a bunch of books, so if you don't have them, if you want them, if you want a new version where it's got the new kissing scene, whatever you guys, no pressure, but I really appreciate you coming out here and supporting me and being here. I really feel like it's not, I don't deserve this. I feel like I'm sitting in a chair like this more often than I should be, and it should be other people that get it, but I really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Perfect. We'll just be right up at that glass display case, and we'll see you all there.